You're watching the OBR streaming network. This is a brand new edition of Things I Think I Know About the Cleveland Browns. My name is Brad Ward. The legendary Quincy Carrier is next to me. Follow him on Twitter at Quinn_C. What's going on, Q?
I didn't know I've been doing this long enough to be legendary.
You're legend
I
in
feel
my
like
mind, brother. Legend
feel
in
like
my
it's a
mind.
I gotta have like 10 years under my belt, and then like 5 more years, and then like like 5, 10, 15 really good years, and then like give me 20 solid like washed back end years, and then boom, legend. There you go. That's
Okay.
when I get the
Right. I'll hold off. Now we'll go with a
I
different
need about
adjective next.
I need about 30 more years until I could get the legendary.
All right. How about the always fantastic Quincy
There
Carrier?
you go.
Yeah, we went too far one direction there. It was top of mind, legendary. I don't know why.
I just made me think about it because somebody kid meant well on Twitter, but he's like, "Yeah, my goat, Quincy Carrier." I'm like, "What am I the greatest of all time at, dog?"
Yeah, yeah,
is it just me, your favorite?
yeah.
But
They
yeah,
mean different things to different people, I think. So we're gonna examine the draft tonight. In a couple different ways. I did a mock this week, and I tried to do. We're doing these daily Browns mock drafts, so we do one every week, Q, and try to do a different theme each week. Like, okay, what are we gonna try to do this week? This week, my theme was like, okay, you got a lot of draft picks, and they got a lot of sixes and 1-7. Let's try to use the sixes and sevens to move around the board intelligently in the mock draft simulators. It's hard, man. That thing's going fast. You got to hit pause at the right time. I mean, it's tough to do.
you got to slow play it out. You got to do it like you got to sweat it out. That's how I like to do it on mine. It's just sweat it out and just wait pick by pick, and then you're watching your board, and you're like, you know what? I can't wait till 217 or whatever it is you're waiting for.
Yeah.
And then the guy you get goes off the board. One time that happened with me with I was trying to get, I think, Jalen Milroe or Will Howard in like the 4th round, and I was waiting it out. I was like, I'm going to trade up, and I traded up thinking Baltimore's definitely not picking a quarterback here, right? Yeah. So I'm going to trade behind them, get my guy, and then Baltimore took the guy I wanted, and I was just like, dog, are you serious, Baltimore?
Like that's so true to reality. They will always take the guy that you
want.
Make
a good landing spot, though, for Jalen Milroe.
Very, very agreed. So, yeah, I want to know, to start with, we're going to examine kind of the Browns' first 2 picks and how they navigate, day one, but also pick 33 is a huge pick because, do you want to get back? We'll get to it, but just, what's coming later here. Do you want to get back into the first round? Do you want to use 33 to move back and add picks? And you have a whole day in between, right? So it's not a rush. Like, you have a really long clock for 33. It's an interesting spot of the draft, right? Kind of a pivot point. So we're going to examine that a little bit closer. But I want to ask you, Q, at 2, if the draft was today, you can have anybody in the draft. Like, are you taking a player in your ideal? Are you taking Carter? Are you trading back? What do you want to do at 2?
Yeah, Abdul Carter. We're just gonna take Abdul Carter here.
Yeah.
At 2, I feel pretty fit and sound about that. I think the only competition here would really be Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
The way I see it, there is strength in having that elite coverage back end, but you have Denzel Ward. I think it's not going to be hard, whether it be with Martin Emerson or any of the other corners you can get in this draft, or maybe one of the corners on your roster, to be able to get competent cornerback 2 play. I don't know what happened with Martin last year. Like, it might have just been an off year for him. That happens with corners every once in a while. But maybe you slide him out, put Greg there. You have enough solutions in your back pocket to have a really good secondary with Grant and everything else that you have, that I don't know if you might hit your ceiling with Travis in the secondary, but I don't know how far away you are from that ceiling right now.
Yeah.
When you have Abdul Carter, Miles Garrett, big question mark, his long-term future with the team. You hope that they can figure something out, but it's not looking great right now. So you want to have a replacement with him in mind in the short term and long term. Also, the idea of those two playing together, very captivating. I think they fit perfectly together. So, yes, and not having potentially Miles to pair with Abdul does kind of hurt the case for Abdul just a little bit. But Abdul, I think, is a special enough prospect to where he can easily anchor a defensive line by himself once he develops into who he's going to be fully. I think he's a fantastic prospect. I think he'd be a top 5 pick in any draft. There are 2 guys in that draft I feel that way about, and that's him and Travis Hunter.
Yeah, you nailed it right there. For me, he's pretty. I have my questions about Travis Hunter a little bit more, but more about how you're going to use him. Like, he needs to be drafted in the right spot and who's going to use him in what way. Not that what kind of athlete he is, but just looking at the board, I just think that Carter is the best player in this draft, and there's really not much to talk about who is the best prospect. So if he's there at 2, you got to take him. You got to take him. Now, a lot of people want to take quarterback here, just because of the opportunity. When are you going to be at 2 again? I hear this argument all the time. When are you going to be at 2 again to take a quarterback with this hype? Okay, so
which is a funny argument, because I remember that same argument being laid out in 2017 when the Browns were just going to be set to take Myles Garrett. Oh, man, but you got to think about Mitchell Trubisky. When are you going to be at 1 again?
Yeah.
We didn't think we'd be at 1 anytime soon again. Next thing we know, we actually lose more games the next season than we did the year before, and we're back at 1. And you took Baker Mayfield, who, say what you want about Baker Mayfield, and you can say a lot of good and bad things about Baker. Much better career than Mitchell Trubisky.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. I mean, he's doing his thing now, and it just took him a while to get there.
Even if you just look at his Cleveland years versus what Mitchell Trubisky did in Chicago, he was clearly a different caliber of prospect, which was worth taking that swing on.
There's no doubt about that. So the thing becomes, and we talked about this a little bit, Daniel Jeremiah yesterday, just to kind of put this in a picture of like what on his Zoom call, compared to last year's class where he has these guys. Cam Ward, he considers to be the same level prospect as Bo Nix, as he had Bo Nix at this point in the process last year. So they had the exact same grade, which would have been a tie for 5th. So they were the 5th quarterback. There's 4 quarterbacks better on his grading scale last year at this point in the process. And Shedeur was just behind, would have fallen just behind Michael Penix, making him QB 7 or 8 in last year's class, if you combine the classes, right? So it's hard to justify using the second pick on a player like that. And a lot of people want to justify, like, they don't even care which guy it is, which is insane to me.
It's just about drafting the position, right?
They just want the position. They just want the quarterback. And I get why, as a fan, you want that, because it's like, who impacts your team the most? Who can have the most impact? The quarterback. Where's the most variance on evaluations? Probably the quarterback. But at the same time, you got to love a guy at 2. You've got to love a guy at 2 to take him. You can't just be like, we think he can be good, or we think he can be, we can win games with him. That's not enough. It needs to be, he is our franchise-changing player to take him.
You need to have that prospect in your top 7, right? The top quartile of your players in the draft. If you want to take them in the top 3, right? Like, that's when the decision at quarterback usually has a higher percentage of working out. I know a lot of people throw out these like hit rate numbers, right? Which I think hit rates are, what is a hit rate? We don't have a universal standard for arguing for what hit rate is, right? Like we're just saying stuff when we say hit rate.
Yeah.
But if you look at the teams that have success that you would want from their quarterback that they take there, and if you look at the teams that don't, there's usually a common denominator, right? The teams that are reaching usually don't succeed. Right. And I think that is a less talked about element of this whole thing. Everybody's talking about, well, go reach. What's wrong with reaching? The problem with reaching is that it is a long proven, unsuccessful method of solving the problem. Here's another issue I have when people bring up just draft the quarterback.
Yeah.
It is a potential solution to the quarterback problem. But people talk about if you just draft the quarterback, you solve the problem. I think that lends a high, not hindsight, but lends a little bit of insight into the mindset of why people are just so hell-bent at quarterback here, right?
Yeah.
Because they want to feel like they have a quarterback. We have not been in this situation in Cleveland where we don't know who the day one starter is since 2018, right? Since basically Baker Mayfield's rookie year. Every year since then, going into the season, we've had a pretty good idea who the main starter for the quarterback is going to be. That's a luxury we aren't used to in Cleveland. We want to feel that luxury, right? We don't want to have this question of who's the day one starter going to be. So we want to draft the guy. I wonder how much these opinions change, Brad, after free agency, right? Like if the Browns do go out and get Kirk Cousins, does all of a sudden having that established name there make Browns fans go, oh, well, actually, you know what? I'm fine with doing something else at 2, right? Like I think right now, the only way you can envision a starter is if you say, hey, we're going to draft the guy because you could poke holes in anybody who's had an NFL career. I've heard people talk about this and it drives me, the lack of nuance in this discussion, Brad. Predictably, it drives me crazy because like I'll bring up Kirk Cousins before he's terrible. And I'm like, hey, man, Kirk Cousins is mediocre, but do you know how much of an improvement mediocre would be to what we had at quarterback for most of the year? Like, I feel like people have forgotten. People act like having Kirk Cousins here, just doing what he did last year outside of the shoulder injury, right? So before week 10, it would be a mass. You would have beat Philadelphia last year with Kirk Cousins. So you would have made the playoffs last year. With Kirk Cousins. Like, I know we spent so much time talking about all the other flaws on the team that it's hard to remember that the main problem last year wasn't that your quarterback was just bad, is that for most of the year, you did not have NFL quality quarterback play.
He was historically bad.
Not just him, DTR too, right? Whenever people bring up these offensive numbers, Browns must address offense at 2. And they're bringing up these horrific quarterback numbers. It's like, yeah, man, Deshaun was bad. Deshaun was awful. As long as you're not going into the season trying to start him again, I think that's better, right? And you can make a significant, just look at how good the offense was or looked in comparison when Jameis was in there.
With Jameis,
I mean, he was very much Jameis Winston, right? Still was able to get to 500 yards. So it tells me that the offense, the players on the offense, there's some juice to be squeezed there. You just got to have somebody better at squeezing the lemons, you know? And
100%.
Last year, we didn't have people who could squeeze juice out those lemons. But if you get somebody who can just competently run what Kevin does well, which Kirk Cousins is well known for being able to do that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Matt Stafford would be amazing if you can get that here. Hell, at this point, Jacoby Brissett would be a massive improvement to what you had last year, right? Not saying you're going to the Super Bowl because you had Jacoby, but it would be a visible improvement from what you had last year.
Give a chance to win some games,
Yeah, so like we're overestimating just how much improvement we need from quarterback to be competitive next year. And then we're overestimating how much improvement you can expect from a rookie quarterback, which the truth is you might draft one of these guys and the problem you had last year might be the problem you have next year, which is, hey, they're not ready to give you NFL level quarterback play. And what are you going to do then if you spend a second overall pick there? I love the what if scenarios, right? The people who want to draft quarterback keep throwing at us, right? Well, what if this guy's good? Okay, what if you take Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, right? And you pass on Abdul Carter and Myles Garrett does leave Cleveland and Shedeur Sanders has a bad 3 years, his first 3 years in Cleveland. But hey, because you took him number 2, you didn't draft the quarterback in 2026 when there were multiple there, right? You didn't draft the quarterback in 2027 when there were multiple there because you were still hanging on to working this thing out with the number 2 overall pick, right? And then you watch Abdul Carter become a defensive player of the year, and you're like, damn, it would have been nice to go from that edge to this edge, and we had the chance to do that, but we drafted Shador, and now we traded Shador for a 6th-round pick to the Buffalo Bills so he could back up somebody, and that's all we have to say for it. Like, there are doomsday scenarios no matter what you could do in the draft, but underestimating how much drafting a quarterback at 2 could backfire on you is one of those things where I'm like, I don't think people are really accepting the reality of this, right? You draft a quarterback at 2. You're not drafting a quarterback at 2 again next year if he sucks. You're not drafting a quarterback for a few years, right? Like, you're taking yourself out that class. So you have to ask that question. Is this quarterback worth not just this year's number 2 pick, but taking myself out of quarterback for the next couple of years?
Yes, that is the biggest point from this. I was just going to say they nailed it with that, because from every year for the next 3 years after, no matter who you take, if it is a quarterback at 2 this year, you're going to say, and we did this with Baker, we've done it with quarterbacks for years that we drafted in the first round. Got to find out who he is this year. Got to find out who he is this year. If we do this, this, and this, got to find out who he is. Got to find out what the can't give up on the investment yet.
Yeah. When the Browns got Deshaun Watson, right, and the Texans traded him, there was a lot of pressure. They had a top 3 pick. Let's get a quarterback. Let's get Kenny Pickett, right? What if the Texans would have drafted Kenny Pickett in 2021? Well, 2022, right?
Yeah.
And in 2023 comes around, they got the 2nd overall pick. They got to pass on C.J. Stroud. And they got to live with that. Imagine that, Browns fan. Imagine if you're the team that said, hey, we're going to take Kenny Pickett because we need a quarterback. And then the next year, C.J. Stroud comes out.
Yeah.
And remember, C.J. Stroud wasn't seen as a sure thing at that point of his career in 2022. It was a toss-up just as much as Cade Klubnik is a toss-up right now, right? Or Drew Aller is a toss-up. I know it's Allard, but I like saying it like that. But but it was a toss-up in that way, but they made the decision to say, hey, we don't think this guy's a number 3 overall pick. We think Derek Stingley is. Now they have Derek Stingley, Will Anderson, and C.J. Stroud. You can't think short-term, right? Because thinking short-term with quarterback ends up with devastating long-term effects. And like, if you want to bounce back from what happened from Deshaun Watson not being on your team anymore, basically, and not being able to get anything out of him, look at the last team that had to get rid of Deshaun Watson. Look how fast they recovered. Why? Because they were patient. They took the best player available. They didn't panic, try to rush a solution at quarterback, and then they eventually got their answer. And I think this short-term mindset where people act like you can't, like, if you don't take a quarterback now, would the Browns gonna have the 30th pick next year or something? Are we gonna make the conference championship game? Can I hit on another thing? I know I'm kind of ranting here, Brad.
No, you're good. Fire away.
So, like, you've ran into this, right? Where you're like, hey, we have the number 2 overall pick. We don't know what pick we're gonna have next year. Mm-hmm. Simultaneously, people are trying to sell me this idea, Brad, that we're gonna suck if we don't take a quarterback at 2. But also, we won't have a pick close enough to get us to a quarterback next year if we do that.
Yep.
How does that make sense?
Doesn't.
Like, so you're telling me if we don't take a quarterback, we're going to be much better this year? So our pick's going to be like in the 20s, 30s?
Right.
Okay. Seems like a more workable situation than where we are right now.
Seems like things worked out pretty well.
Yeah. Or if we take a quarterback, we might be back in the top 5, which, again, just point out how much of a horror story that could be if you're married to a quarterback that you took at 2.
Yes. That's a great point. And you're back there to do it. Very well laid out. Love the reasons. Here's the ultimate question. We're in agreement here, but the Browns front office, I don't know. We've talked about this before. We don't know where Andrew Berry's at as far as, like, does he feel like his back's against the wall? Does he feel like he has to win this year? I kind of lean towards yes, but we don't know what assurances have been given. Is he disciplined enough to do the right thing anyways, process-wise? So let me ask you this. We know what you would do. We know what I would do. What do you think the Browns do at 2 if the draft was tomorrow?
I think they take Abdul Carter if he's there too. And the reason I do is this is why Andrew Berry is here, right? Like Andrew Berry is not here to make emotional decisions. We hired him with his mindset and his process because he is a process oriented guy, right? Because we've seen the damage that very emotional people, when they have that general manager role, can do. I know people love like jumping up John Dorsey is like the greatest GM to ever exist because he's an assistant on the Lions right now. And I love how they give him credit for all the stuff that Detroit's done, like he's the GM, like at the Detroit Lions. But that's kind of Dorsey's MO, is taking credit for stuff that might not necessarily be his idea. Like he gets credit for Pat Mahomes. Seems like it was an Andy Reid decision there. Same thing with Tyreek Hill, which seems like an Andy Reid decision there. But this is the John Dorsey like scam that we get all the time. But John Dorsey, right? Emotion led him to hire Freddie Kitchens.
Yep.
Remember that?
Charge.
Yep. This get Freddie. He's perfect for Baker. Which pretty much was the beginning of the end for Baker Mayfield in Cleveland making that decision. So, if you're mad that Baker's not here, you could probably look at John as part of the reason he's not. But my beef with those arguments aside, this is what Andrew is here for, is not to make that emotional decision. It's to stop the Browns from making all these knee-jerk, super reactionary things and drafting a guy because a homeless guy said it was cool, or, just like going off vibes in the draft room. So we're just going to draft Justin Gilbert despite not doing any prep work because Mike Pettin said, "Give me a corner." Like this is the whole point of everything the Cleveland Browns have created over the last 6 years, is so that in a moment like this, we avoid the iceberg that we have hit so often, which is doing the thing that gives us that instant gratification and that makes us feel good now, but is probably not the greatest idea going forward, right? Not the most well thought out idea.
Perfectly.
We have fallen victim to that in Cleveland so many times, and we do it every time willingly. Like we're as Browns fans, we are the dog that runs into the glass door, right? Because every time we smack the door, right? We got excited about Brandon Weeden, we got excited about Brady Quinn, we got excited about Johnny Manziel. This is why the Browns have been trapped for this whole time. This is why Andrew Berry is here. If he cannot be better than that, then the whole purpose of him being here, pretty much defeated. So,
do you ever get concerned about like him worrying about his job security, or do you think like what's interesting, and I always come back to this when I ask this, is the way that he has described his job in the past is that like he's a steward to the Browns organization, right? Or the Browns organization at this time, or whatever, how he describes it. It makes it sound like he understands that he is just to do what is best for the organization at all times, whether his job's on the line or not. So like, I feel like he has that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Integrity, to do that.
I think there's a confidence there, right? That he is going to be the guy there. Look, this front office, it drives people crazy because like we talked about it. They're stubborn. They're going to do what they want to do at the end of the day. The front office, Kevin Stefanski is like this at times, like where they have these decisions made up and they're going to see their plan through. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But this is what organizations do that have longevity, is try things out and try to have them last, would stick with these decisions for a while. Mike Tomlin drives people crazy like this in Pittsburgh. John Harbaugh drives people crazy like this in Baltimore. This is part of having longevity and having somebody there who's going to be not going to go with the wind, right? Like not going to move as the wind goes, which I think is a good thing in the long term, as long as that they remain flexible enough to new ideas. So yeah, I think this is part of it. The thing with Andrew Berry and the thing with Kev is, as much as people are down on them outside, I don't know how they feel inside about him.
Right.
But I'd have to imagine if you're Jimmy Haslam, look at the first 10 years of his ownership before he hired DePodesta before he hired Kevin Stefanski, before he hired Andrew Berry to run this whole thing, right? Really, Andrew Berry, Kevin, right? 2020. The Browns have been a dramatically better franchise. Like, it hasn't been as fun to root for because of Deshaun Watson, but they have been a better football team than they were before that, especially if we're looking at what they were doing when Jimmy Haslam owned the team, right?
Yeah.
I think Jimmy likes that. I think Jimmy is somebody who does not want to fire his coaches and GMs. I think Jimmy is somebody who is scarred from that reputation he gained from firing all those coaches and GMs.
The clown stuff versus the professionalism that we have come to know from. Yeah.
Well, and it's like, I think Jimmy likes to keep the same people in charge. Like, I think Jimmy, outside of like popular thought, he does like continuity. Like, you go back, look at his Flying J stuff in the thing that got him to trouble with the FBI. One of those things, like, these people were working with like in Jimmy's executive brass for like 10, 15 years, right? Like, he does not like heavy turnover, right? He doesn't like the optics of it. He doesn't like how it reflects on himself. So I think it's going to take a lot more than just like they had a bad season this year for the Browns to move off of that. And if they can, if the front office can sell them a plan saying, hey, you know, I mean, this is a University of Tennessee alum and they say, hey, we're going to get a Manning next year. You know, I'm not saying they're going to tank. I don't think they are. But even if they went that drastic and say, hey, we're going to go all in for this Arch Manning kid, that's going to be something where Jimmy might be able to say, hey, yeah, man, it makes sense. You know, they don't bend the knee to the pressure of the fan base in the way that other regimes were a bit sensitive to how they were perceived on sports talk radio or how they were perceived by the fans. Like, I remember we had multiple GMs who used to call into the really big show. That's just not happening, right? Where they're looking for that approval from that audience. So for better or worse, I do think Andrew Berry, and look, we talked about it, Brad. Balls of steel. He's gonna have to demonstrate ball. Like, we're gonna put this to the test this offseason, man. Because there's gonna be pressure to trade Miles. There's gonna be pressure to take a quarterback at 2, and he has to say no to all of it.
Avoid both of those hazards, and that's a tough task this offseason of all off seasons, right? So, balls of
this
steel.
might be one of the most difficult off seasons for a GM that I could remember in any sport. Like, you because like in the background of all of this, right? Your franchise player asking for a trade, you got the number 2 overall pick. You have this Deshaun Watson contract that you're trying to just like move away from. Like, one of these problems would be enough to control your whole offseason. The fact that he has to cycle through all 3 of these things going on at the exact same time, after the team had one of their worst records in a very long time under your control, when your whole thing was, hey, look how much better the team has been since you've been here in 2020. That this is a lot on his, like, we're going to find out if Andrew Berry's the guy to be the GM or Ozzie Newsome. Well, he's got to pass this test.
Yeah, he's got to navigate through all this stuff.
Yeah, because this is a storm.
It is, and he will be tested multiple ways. So, all right, let me ask you this then: as we pivot to 33, because it's such an interesting pick. It's the pick that goes overnight, right? You're on clock overnight, which usually brings up a number of trade potential possibilities to trade back. You could also trade up, like I did in my mock this week, where I traded up to take Emeka Egbuka at 28. And so you have options at 33. But before we get into those options, let me ask you this in regards to, now that we're back at talking about the Browns' perspective at 33, where would you feel comfortable taking Shedeur Sanders?
This is a interesting question, because I don't think anything I say can be considered right from anybody who wants to take him at 2, right? So if you want to take him at 2 and I say feels like 25, like 25, trading back in for an extra 4th, giving up a 4th to get back into the first round. I think that's usually the price of 4th or a 5th.
Yeah.
That would feel right for me for Shador, right? Like my whole thing with not taking Shador at 2 is I just don't think it's worth missing out on getting one of these guys at the top end of the draft who could become one of the best players
A staple. Yeah.
at their position group for a while, right?
Yeah.
So if you can get that guy and then you get Shador and then it's a much less buy-in, so you can have some flexibility to say, hey, if we get a chance at Arch or Lenoris or maybe K Klubnik has the magical year ×2 that he had last year, but like even better, and then all of a sudden he's considered a top 3 pick and you have the chance to select him, cool.
Yeah,
You can make that move.
Yeah.
If Shador hasn't bared fruit, or you can trade Shador high or whatever it is to move on from it. It's not the same as investing that second overall pick, which is like, hey, like guys you draft in the top 5, I mean, they got to be franchise cornerstones, right? Like, and you can't just give up on a franchise cornerstone because they had a bad year. So this is, I think, a much more fine place to take a quarterback. If it doesn't work out, the collateral damage isn't as big because you're not worried about it taking you out of a couple of draft classes. Like if it's an immediate failure, if it's a delayed failure, like Kenny Pickett, 2 years, they couldn't draft the quarterback. Like that still could happen, right? But I think at least by 2027, you'd be in a situation to make the determination whether this guy could be your guy or not. And then you could still draft somebody in 2027, where if you take him at 2, you're probably riding out that rookie contract like the Giants did with Daniel Jones, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you get any sniff, you're going to spend $45 million. Or, well, by then it's going to be what, 58? $60 million for that guy. The way that the salary cap's rising. So that to me is a lot more of a fine place to get a Shador or a Cam Ward. I think 25, if you have to trade back into the first round, it's worth the extra 4. I don't think anybody's going to complain about that.
No.
Would I say that it's like a sure bet to work out? No, I still have my concerns about these prospects, but I compared Shador to Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater was that level of pick, and I think if he would have stayed healthy, there was a good chance of him living up to that pick in Minnesota. They're in that Derek Carr range of prospect where it could work out that way or something like that, but the spend is just much less there.
Yeah, but that's very fair, I think. Now, are there any other guys? You're at 33. Are there any other guys that are fringe first-round picks that you worry about getting to 33 that are worth for you jumping up to get? Is there like a player in the first round? Like for me, it is Ibuka. Like if he fell to 28, I think he's in this class. I think he's like a perfect fit for the Browns offense. I would go get him if I could.
It depends on how the wide receiver board fell for me, because I think Ibuka and Ayoman are very different wide receivers, but I think gonna be the same quality of player if they pan out. Ibuka has that just incredible athletic ability, but like Ayoman, he kind of reminds me a lot of Amari Cooper, right? Crisp route runner, strong hands, just a guy who could be that low tier fringe number 1 receiver for you. So like if Ibuka's gone at 20, well, on the board at 28, you said, right?
Yeah.
But Ayoman is still there, and I call around and I don't think anybody's going to take a wide receiver, I'm fine sitting at 33 and getting whichever one falls to me. I think if you're the Browns, maybe tackle is where you get that urge from, right? So for me, Josh Connerly is a guy I have ranked in that same space. If Josh Simmons falls to late first round, I think you got to get the green light to move back up in there and go grab him.
What about Membu? Are you moving
and
up
from Purdue?
Yeah.
I think he's a guard instead of a tackle. So that changes things.
Same with Abel.
Yeah, was that the guy? Yeah, Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. Definitely an interior guy. I think he would be a center for the Cleveland Browns, to be honest with you. Really good player. Could play guard, could play both positions. I think if the Browns draft him, he'd be a center. I don't think they trade back in for that. And they might handle center in free agency too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think tackle's tackle's the one position outside of quarterback where if I'm like, hey, this guy's there, it's only going to cost us a fourth to move up. It might end up being worth it. There is going to be a little bit of a cost there because like you do want to bring in as many players as possible in this year's draft. But yeah, I think tackle. If Simmons is there, if you're really concerned about Connerly making it to 33, that is where it justifies it because the scarcity at the position. Like there are players like Caleb Johnson who I think is really good, but
yeah,
ultimately I think the class is so good at running back that I'm like, hey, you don't gotta jump up for a running back here, right? Like the price is not going to be right for that, but you be fine waiting, and I think you can get maybe somebody who's not as good as Caleb Johnson, but still can fill that hole for you. So yeah, that's tight end. I mean, not tight end, tackle, quarterback.
Tackle.
Yeah, those are two spots where I'm like, hey, it's scarce enough to where I would be willing to slightly reach and jump in and trade up for a guy here or there to take him at an earlier position, just to secure that I get it because I don't feel good about the rest of the board.
Yeah, because there is kind of a drop off after the Simmons Connerly pick, and often you see Connerly mocked at 33. I've seen that him mocked there a few times. So
teams are going to know the Browns are going to be interested in a tackle, right?
Yes.
So there might be competition to get to 32 if you're the Browns, move up one spot because somebody else is trying to do it.
Plus that 5th-year option is nice. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's something to certainly keep an eye on there. I agree with the wide receiver thing. If you like somebody else and he's still there at 28, you can go ahead and wait. But if you love him like I love Ibuka, then I'm coming up to get him for five picks. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm with you there. Tackle, quarterback, maybe wide receiver.
I wonder how this is going to work because, like, of course, this happens for Philadelphia.
Yes.
But a lot of people talk about the Browns having the power position at 2 to make these trades and move back. If I don't think this quarterback class is good, I cannot assume that everybody else thinks this quarterback class is amazing. Like I just outsmarted the league or something like that. I'm going to assume that there's not going to be that much energy to trade up from 2, right?
Yeah.
Because what drives up energy for trade up to 2 is quarterbacks. And if I don't want to take a dude at 2 and we're quarterback desperate, who wants to trade up and then take them at 2? Like, I think that's a very hopeful projection a lot of people are working off of. I think the power position in this draft might end up being pick 32, right? That last pick of the draft, because teams are going to have a really good idea of what Cleveland wants. If there's a quarterback that slides there, right? Like let's say Shador is sliding and looks like he might slide out the first or something. Well, all of a sudden, if you're Philly, you know you have the power position here because if you're Cleveland, you might want to trade up. If you're a team that wants a quarterback, you're definitely going to want to trade up because you know that Cleveland's sitting there at 33. They probably didn't take a quarterback at 2. Shador's falling all the way to here. So now you got to get up ahead of Cleveland to get the quarterback, which means that Philly's going to have all the leverage here, which is just disgusting because Howie Roseman already is deadly enough in the draft without leverage. Like, what 2 best players on the board is he going to end up with this time? But yeah, I think 32 is one of those spots to keep an eye on where it might be a hot spot. I wonder if somebody's going to try to like undercut Philly to become the hot spot where it's like, hey, Buffalo's like, hey, no, you can move up to 30. Right, you don't. We'll sell you 30 for 32 prices, right?
Yes.
So it's I think that last part of the first round and the early part of the second, that's where you should expect a lot of trade activity, or at least some trade activity to get a little bit interesting. I know a lot of people have it pegged for the top 5 here, but I don't really think it's going to happen like that this year.
There's a fall off there too of talent. Like there's an initial fall off, but there's another fall off right there around 32, 33, 34, 35.
I would say around like pick 40, there's like, okay, boom, like all the first round talent's gone.
Yeah. So You can see a lot of teams maneuvering around. It's interesting too because it's Philadelphia, and then we know the relationship with Barry and the Philadelphia front office. 32 to 33, and you're overnight. You're talking about an additional year at 32. It's very interesting. And then 33 is overnight. So the Browns are on the clock at 33. We talked about the guys we would move up for. Kind of our dream guys would probably be the same at 33, right? A tackle like Connerly or Simmons. What if you move back from there? Would you consider moving back from 33? Like, what will it take to move back from 33? Because that's a very like what I don't think like a team falling in love with Jackson Dart enough to try to move up to 32 or 33 is out of the realm of possibilities. Like, I think some teams have him right there with Shador.
I think Jackson Dart is a smokescreen to distract you from the fact that a lot of teams are probably going to want to go after Will Howard. And I think the Browns are included in this. I've watched Will Howard
this high
since his quarterback, right?
Yeah.
I think these guys are going to make the determination that what's really the difference from taking him in the second versus the third, right? What's really, if you think enough of him to want him on your team, what's really the difference there, right? And I think that's going to drive conversation. I think if the Browns trade back from 33, I would not be surprised if they went from 33 to like 39. If Will Howard is who they go with at 39. And it might be a little bit of a surprise. It's earlier than a lot of people feel like for him. And we got to see how he measures in at the combine, hand size. Yeah. I think he needs to demonstrate during his pro day. And look, I usually don't care about pro day, but what I do want to see from Will is like, how many pitches do you have that you could throw accurately, right? We know he has that nice little floater that he could drop right there in the bucket, but can you step in and drive one on a consistent basis, right? How much of the field can you use, and how much of like you underthrowing some of these outs were because that's how the wide receivers liked it. Yes. I think you're going to have to figure out some of that.
I said this last night about him, because I love I think his processing skills and the ability to kind of layer in footballs and over the middle is above most quarterbacks in this class. The thing that I haven't seen on film from him is him go like 5-step drops, stand in the pocket, and have to beat a safety to the field side from the far hash and beat him with velocity. Can he access that throw? You know what I mean? In the little honey hole there between the 15, 25 yards down the field. I haven't seen him do that on film because Ohio State rolled him out a lot and used a lot of stuff to shorten fields for him, which you can do in the NFL, but I haven't seen that on film yet, and I want to see that at the Combiners Pro Day.
I think also, how much is the hashes being much smaller, right? Which means the field side, or not the field side, the weak side, right, that you're going to be working on, the side the ball is on, is much wider in the NFL than it is in college, right, where it's more condensed. He did a really good job working on that condensed side of the field in college. Most of his most amazing throws are vertical on the condensed side. Can he still make those vertical throws from inside where that hash is going to be in the NFL, which is about, I don't know the exact measurements, but it's a significant amount distance in. It's like at least 5 yards in. So does that change what he can access from a throwing level in the NFL? We talked about it, right? The ability to drive. Like, I also wonder how much of this is technique based, right? Because I look at Shador, I'm like, Shador has amazing technique. You can tell he's had the best coaching since he was 12.
Of course.
When I watch Will Howard, he doesn't have bad technique, but it's like, man, for a guy who's as big as he is, he should really be able to drive this ball just a little harder. And I wonder how much of that is mechanically related. Not saying he's going to make a huge jump, right? But I do think that some of this stuff he can get more juice on that football if he just follows through or tunes up his mechanics a bit. Because I feel like some of this is just he doesn't really follow through very hard on these footballs at time. And that's why it always comes in a little soft, a little bit more arched, because that's how he prefers to throw it. So, yeah, and I think also him being in the combine, like I would say if I had to guess before the combine, who's the biggest riser going to be?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be Will Howard because he's going to get to the combine. He's going to be 6'5", 235. Yeah. We're going to find out that Shador's not that big, right? Which might throw people off, right? He might be 6 foot, right, or a little taller than 6 foot, but not 6'1". So that might throw some people off there when it comes with Shador. But Will Howard's going to be 6'5". I reckon that him and Shador and Cam are going to run similar 40 times, right? If they all run, I think he's going to run a similar 40 times.
Yeah.
And he probably will have a better 10-yard split. That's my hot take there.
I think so
he's
too.
A very intelligent runner of the football, like very similar to those guys, but just at a much bigger size. And if he demonstrates that, hey, like some of this stuff you saw on tape with arm strength wasn't necessarily an inability to do it physically, but I just need to tighten up my mechanics a little bit more. Then you can easily see how that's a second round pick here. I wonder how much of like the Jackson Dart thing, because like I just can't find anybody to tell me that they actually want to take Jackson Dart in the first or second round. But you know, if somebody does it, good on them. But
we'll see. I like him a little bit.
I wonder how much of this is like, hey, we're going to talk about Dart, so nobody talks about the guy who just had one of the best runs in college football. Because I watch Will Howard's tape, and like he and Shador give me the most wild throws. Cam Ward's in there too, and it's interesting that like he's the one guy who's never been lumped into a conversation with those guys, even if we're talking about second, third round. So. Yeah, I think Will's going to be interesting. I'm planning on dropping like a breakdown of exactly why it is that I feel it's going through like 6 Will Howard games. But yeah, it's been interesting to see that. But yeah, just to circle back to the original question, I just would not be surprised if Will goes in that first 10 picks of the second round. And if you like Will enough, it is justifiable. Yeah, like I don't know about 33. I think I would still try to trade back, but it depends on how much heat you're feeling and how much you like him, right? Like if he goes, rocks the combine out, you might want to take him at 33. But if he goes there, he has a pretty good combine, still have some concerns about things, then okay, you trade back maybe to 40, 42 or something like that. Mid second round, try to get an extra third out of it. And try to do what the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts, which is, hey, this guy might not be all pro at quarterback, right? Like he may never be an all pro, but we think the floor is low enough. We think he can do the basics well enough that if we build a good enough team around him, we can win a Super Bowl. And him being a second round pick allows you to do that because he'd be cheap and you wouldn't have to spend your best resources like you would 100%. If you wanted to take Shador, number 2 overall, on quarterback. You're allowed to say, hey, no, we're going to go get Abdul Carter, right? We're going to go and use both our third round picks on maybe a wide receiver, not a wide receiver, but a tight end and a running back to build the run game. You know, you still maintain a lot of flexibility there. And it's not somebody you got to start right away, even though I think Will would probably be ready pretty quickly if he's going to be decent in the league.
He seems like he would be one of the more NFL ready guys because of his size and because of like the questions you have that I have about most of the quarterbacks, you know, are processing. I mean, the thing about Will Howard that is the most intriguing is just his ability to kind of get through progressions and process. And it seems like he has an innate feel of just playing the position.
I feel
that's like he's very intriguing. Like you want to be
very impressive on those whiteboard meetings that we see in the combine, right?
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
when he gets into those meetings with them. Yeah, I wonder because he did not do the Senior Bowl. He was supposed to do the Senior Bowl. He didn't do it. I was wondering. I'm like, I thought that was a missed opportunity for him because he would have looked like a knight in shining armor at the Senior Bowl because it wasn't a great look for a lot of these quarterbacks because we walked out thinking Tyler Shaw's the best guy. He's so much better than Tyler Shaw.
Yeah.
So I wonder if this combine is going to be that opportunity for Will because I think there's he did this against some of the best secondaries like Texas, Penn State, Oregon twice. Like I know people use that he had the best wide receivers that money can buy at Ohio State against him, and that is true. And look, Jeremiah Smith bailed him out of a few situations at Ohio State, but it wasn't just all the wide receivers. Like it didn't look like
No.
Kyle McCord out there. No disrespect to Kyle, but it did look like Kyle McCord out there throwing to Marvin Harrison, where it's like it's all on Marvin.
Yeah,
It looked a lot different than that. So I do think
it did.
he deserves a lot of credit for how he played. And the more I watch him, the more I like him.
Yeah, me too. His intangibles as well. I
Mm-hmm.
think he's a guy that can command a room and lead. And I think he showed that uh, to everybody kind of in their playoff run in this season, overcome adversity, all of those things. It kind of checks all those boxes for a guy that's not getting the hype with the top guys in this class. It's very intriguing.
Yeah, which is
Um,
crazy, right? Because normally the 6'5" guy who
yeah,
wins a national championship at
yeah,
quarterback, usually
yeah.
that guy gets overhyped, right?
You would think. The question, I think you make a good point about his size and our questions about his arm strength. Like Josh Allen, there was never a question about Josh Allen's arm strength. He always had a cannon, but his question was about his accuracy when he came out. And I watched a video on what they did to help him with his accuracy, and it was basically he was just throwing with his arm, all arm, and
Just
they
straight
got
ballot.
him. Yeah, they got him to get his hips into it and his body to be the driving force behind his throws so that he can use his arm for just touch and
Mhm.
accuracy instead of having to rely on just the arm strength to get it there. You wonder if a similar type of making sure that with his frame and body, if you make sure that Will Howard gets his hips and his whole body into the throws, can expand on some of that arm strength a little bit.
I also wonder like how much of this is like he takes a little bit off so he can be a little bit more accurate.
Yeah,
And that's why it looks like it does. And I wonder how accurate he is when he does try to put you don't want him to go 100%, right? But like
yeah,
92, right? 95% into it
yeah,
for a couple of throws a game. But I'm gonna be honest, like he has that ability to be on time and accurate. And as long as he can work with the smaller hashes in the NFL,
yeah,
the field side well and just be serviceable. I mean, not the field
yeah,
side, but the short side well, it'd be
yeah,
serviceable on the field side to where you can't just leave it super empty if you're a
yeah,
defensive coordinator. I think he's a quick enough processor and a decisive enough quarterback where he can make those decisions a little bit quicker and kind of live with the lack. Like if you look for quarterbacks who can live with a lack of arm strength, he does have the things that you need to work there. Now it's not a
like
100% projection. There's a good chance that you draft Will Howard and he ends up being a backup, right?
yeah,
But I think, on the scale of 1 to 10, if you take them in the second round, it's like a 7 out of 10 shot
yeah,
where I'm like, yeah, you might get something. Like I feel better than average about it.
yeah. It's exciting. Like the quarterback we talked about before, like the quarterback position will do. It will give you hope and get you excited. And you have to be careful of that trap. I do think you make some really good points about Howard. Anybody else you love in this area worth mentioning? We talked tackle. They have to address that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
The crazy thing about you take the more I look at this class, there are just a couple areas where it's shockingly deep. Um, like edge, defensive tackle. It's a deep class. I think
Yeah,
you can
running
get
back,
guys that can
tight
help all
end.
the way through, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, tight
There are gonna be
end,
some good undrafted players this year.
running back is ridiculous. I mean, you can get 30 running backs that can help you in this,
Mm-hmm.
it's wild. Um, so you wonder if like here's like a Mike Green. I don't think he'll get there, but if he gets to like late first round, is that a guy worth coming up and get? Not obviously not if he just took Carter, but he's
If
guys like that are intriguing as hell.
Jihad Ward is somebody I think of that's super intriguing there at
Yeah.
33. Like Mike Green would almost be, if Mike Green failed at 33, I feel like there's a reason, right,
Yeah.
that he failed at 33. And
Mhm.
then that's a red flag to me because I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a guy that's probably should go in the top 15, right?
Sure looks like
So
it. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like I would be careful with like certain guys that they fell there because it's like, hey, why is this guy here? Is this like a medical or is there like an off the field situation with a player? But yeah, like a Jahal Ward, right? I think
Or one of these top running backs at 33 is intriguing.
Caleb Johnson, right? Really intriguing at
Hampton.
33. Yeah.
I
Oh,
even
Marion
have
Hampton.
I have Trevion Henderson up there. I think he's going to test freakishly at the combine.
No,
So
Trav's gonna kill the 40.
yeah, I
He's
mean
gonna destroy. He's gonna destroy the
the
40.
more I watch of him, the more I think he's up there with Hampton. And
I would love to know what his
yeah.
3 cone's gonna be. I just want to know how
I know.
flexible those hips are, right? Like his ability to go side to side, because that's the only thing I'm concerned about him. But yeah, I mean, you're gonna get a lot of risers here, but I still would go Caleb Johnson, probably be the best fit there. I could see them loving Travion though, because that's what everybody hoped that Jerome Ford could be in Cleveland.
Yes.
But was not able to become. There's a number of guys there. I mean, we talked about A. Manor. We talked about Emeka Ibuka, another guy there that I think a lot of people would love there. It was Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan.
Loveland.
Which would make you ask some really hard questions. Like, man, if he's there, that means so many of the other better tight ends are there. Well, not better, but good tight ends are there, and you might be able to wait. Brad, I think this is an interesting question for people to ask themselves. How long do you give yourself, hey man, there's still guys back there before you just take one of these guys, right? Like, because you don't want to go, man, I could get a running back next round. I can get a running back next round. And then it's the 6th round, and then you're picking between like Donovan Edwards and like Byshul Tootin or somebody like that, right?
Yeah. Who I actually really like a lot.
But, I mean, like that's what I'm saying. Like, if there's still going to be guys there that you could take.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, at what point do you say, you know what, man, Caleb Johnson is a 3-down back. There's not a lot of them there. I think you almost got to separate this running back class into tiers so you don't run into that problem here. Same thing with tight end. Same thing with guard and edge and especially tackle, right? So yeah, there's a lot to figure out. And I think the depth in this class is going to be challenging because it's like, this is the best draft that hates positional value. Like, positional value be damned in this year's draft, because all the deep parts of this draft are parts that people have told you for years you don't draft high, but like the talent is so overwhelming that you're going to have to make some tough decisions here. So yeah, I think Caleb Johnson be somebody that's like, hey, I'm willing to break the mindset of there's a running back next round to get somebody like him, because I think the difference between him and like a Devin Neal is big enough to
you gotta have that. I think the way you said it is perfect. Tiers, and like if at this point in the draft, and his value, like if he's there, it's worth that at that point. And then what guys are in that tier, and then what guys are we waiting on, and then how many guys are left in this tier? Can we take it? Do we have to take them now, or can we get to the next round? It's something that's going to be difficult to navigate. But it's the fun of the draft, man. It's awesome. Good job, Quincy. Fantastic as always. Make sure you lock on to Twitter. Follow Quincy Carrier at KWEN_C. I wanted to say Q and K at the same time, and I couldn't do it. But Quen_C on Twitter. Quincy Carrier. Any parting words before we get out of here, man?
Hey, man, you're never as good as you think you are. You're never as bad as you think you are in the NFL. And always remember that, no matter who you're talking about, especially with all the conversations going about Kirk Cousins, That's especially like prescient, where I'm like, hey, he's not as bad as people think Kirk Cousins. He's not as good as Kirk Cousins is either. Try to keep a balanced mindset, right? Try not to dip too far into doomerism. Try not to run so far away from the doomerism that you end up blind and you're living in this false world where everything's sunshines and rainbows. You got to take both for what they are. And then, you got to look at your hands, play with the cards that you have, and just, it's like blackjack, or not even blackjack. It's like spades, where you just got to play the best hand you got till you get a better hand and just keep on moving up from there. But it's never that bad. It's always never that good. So, you got to keep a steady head.
Well said. For Quincy Carrier, my name is Brad Ward. Get locked over at the OBR. This has been another edition of Things I Think I Know. We are out.